Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Jackson, always a pleasure.
It really is always a pleasure. Are you in Toronto or Chicago today?
Yeah, no, I'm in Toronto, and I'm sitting in the basement of the cottage house. Which you
nice.
like so much.
Love it.
Yeah,
I do love that cottage house.
Very quiet down here, and so anyway, I want to tell you that we've just begun the interviews for the next quarterly book, which will be December, because the one for September is already at the printer, and we'll be back in time for your workshop.
I love it.
September, and that's my
how I plan on living to 156.
Yeah, my plan for living to 156, and very excited about that. But the one for December is Who Not How. And,
very nice.
And which, of course, came directly from the center of our venture right here.
Yes.
And you're actually the scout who brought back the news of Who Not How. So, yeah. And we talk about that. We talk about that in the very first, the introduction, that you were the articulator of this possibility. And
I love
the other thing is that we have a book contract with Ben Hardy, who you know.
Yeah.
And so we have a New York publisher who is very excited about this idea. So this will be a major book next in 2019.
A capital B book, is that what it is?
A capital B book, yes. And in both cases, the one in December and the major book next year, I do, except for headlines and subheads, I do none of the other writing whatsoever.
Right. Just the talking.
Just the talking. I do the authoring, I do the talking, and Ben is actually going to use the structure and the context of our small book as the framework for the big book. So this is actually
very nice.
An additional big jump, from the standpoint of a small book becoming almost like the fractal beginning for a big book.
Right. That's an interesting, it'll be good to see how that all plays out. Ben shared with me a little while ago that that you guys were doing that with the Who Not How. And that's it's going to be a really interesting thing to see how the, version 1 goes on to become a bigger book. And it's really, I first of all, this is kind of a breakthrough for us. I don't have any experience of this, so this is just a surprise that's in motion right now. So I will also be fascinated. But if you step one further back, is the only reason that the concept got created in the first place was because we committed to doing this podcast series. Otherwise, I thought it would never have come up. Right.
Okay, so it was the creation of one platform that actually generated the idea. And actually, the real clincher was when you got up in a strategic coach workshop, in a 10 times workshop, and actually explained it to everybody. And simultaneously, I was able to formulate the actual graphic. You were talking and I was drawing at the same time, and that was the next jump. And then, it's a little germ of an idea just kept growing and growing and growing.
Yeah, I think that fundamentally that shift is the shift that, especially now as we're moving to Cloudlandia, that's the play that's absolutely possible. We've never had it better than right now to collaborate with, who's at scale for anything.
So our access to the workforce is really like that. It's something. I was sharing in, I've been all over here all summer. And one of the places I was in California, and I was, sharing at Taki Moore's event in Redondo Beach, this concept. And one of the things that, I realized now that I didn't have a word for is that I'd been sharing and coming from this place that it just feels like access to execution, if we take ideas and execution as the two crucial elements for getting something done, that our access to execution is unprecedented right now, and it's really becoming commoditized. That the execution is really the thing that can be push buttoned. It's not really that difficult to figure out now. And somebody shared with me that they do a lot of work with the term that he used was BPOs. And do you know what that is? I've never heard that term before.
I had never heard.
Okay,
nope. I can't even take a guess.
So it's a business process organization, and that there are, entire teams, he was saying, at offices in the Philippines and other offshore places where they can, basically infinitely scale a, business processes that require people, And so as long as you've got, it really tied into this idea that I have of the scale ready algorithm, right? The thing you're going to scale anything. The thing that is being scaled is like the yeast cell of this, right? The mother yeast cell that you're duplicating is the business process or the algorithm, as I call it, and that in a world, how all these things completely overlay on all the things that we talk about, and that you introduced me to this concept of the levels of make it up, make it real, and make it recur. And that where I'm really, where my interest and my fascination and my motivation is in making it up, and with help, making it real, and that's really the thing, because I really have not had that much skill or aptitude in the scaling portion of it, which is making it recur, multiplying it, and making it recur, because it's certainly it's a business process and discipline. That's discipline. If you take it like it's almost like if you're on a level of on a progression of creativity on one end, discipline on the other end, like rigor, discipline and rigor. That's really what that is taking the creativity and sliding it along that scale all the way out to the end of disciplined rigor. That's what's being executed. And as a 10 quick start, you could see that that's far, it's not hard to see that my thing is on the creativity side.
Yeah. And, similarly, because we're 10 impact or 10 quick start twins in this process.
Yeah.
So we're, it's very, very interesting. This is just a subhead in the outline. So I've completed what I do is I set up a complete outline of mindsets which really starts with 8 mindsets, a screener that I have, which would be, a mindset scorecard for the coach people who know what we're talking about here. But it's just a scorecard of what's the mindset foundation of a particular idea. For example, if you who, not how, there's a mindset, and the first mindset is diagram explains everything. In other words, if you just look at the who, not how diagram, which is just an arrow which has the word you in it, and then there's a star that says bigger and better. And then out of the first arrow, there's a star that goes, an arrow that goes down that says how. And so you're tempted when you see something in the future that's bigger and better and you buy into it, then there's the temptation that you'll now do the how to actually achieve the idea. And what I'm saying is you have to learn how to refrain from following that temptation and instead switch your thinking, okay, now who's the who or who's that are going to do it? So that's the line that you're talking about. It's the making it up is actually seeing the bigger and better result. Okay. And you can get better and better at staying on your own side of the line of giving compelling reality to something that's just in your head.
Yes. I think that's really, that's where, as soon as you can diagram and articulate it, then that's really, and there's almost like these little ways of, the transitions in between the make it up, make it real is, I was thinking about it that the gateways to those, like the make it up, between the make it up and make it real is a who armed with a clearly articulated impact filter. And the transition from make it up to make it recur is another who armed with a strategy circle.
That's this is exactly what we've discovered. I started my whole development of strategic coach as a very powerful one-on-one coaching, where I was the coach. Yeah. But the medium that I used for my coaching was an initial, which I still think is the foundational thinking tool in coach, which is the strategy circle. And I did that for full-time one-on-one for about 7 years before I began to see that it seems to me that about 80% of what I'm doing with everybody is exactly the same. And I can now take this to a workshop setting. So instead of me coaching one-on-one, I can coach in the beginning 1-on-10 and then 1-on-20, and it got bigger and bigger, and then other people could do that. So there was multipliers, there was a scaling quality to it. But my feeling is that from my standpoint, my experience, you've exactly defined what's the crossover tool between making it up and making it real. It's an impact filter. And the crossover tool from making it real to making it recur is the strategy circle.
So there we go. So today is 2018. I did my first strategic coach workshop in 1997. So 21 years, and we've discovered it, the secret.
Yep. There we go.
And here we are.
There we go. There we go. We should have just gone there right at the start.
Isn't that funny? But, it's really...
Well, you always do that. It's kind of funny what we do with just to observe what both of us just did in this conversation. We tend to, see where we started and see where we're ended. And then what we try to do is just economize backwards and say, we probably wasted about 80-90% of our time there. We could have done this with 10% of the time that we actually put in to get to this point of clarity. But in truth, you can't.
Right. Well, you look at that as even then, I think that when you look at what's, changed even in that 20 years, that, the internet was barely a thing then.
Oh, yeah.
And there was no such thing as a podcast. I mean, even I think about that the byproducts of us having these conversations and doing it in a way to be able to share it. We don't. It's so easy now for us to see, but you think about what that would have involved back, even 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Impossible.
Yeah, and the other thing is that communication such as the one we were doing, this would have been seen as very, very inappropriate in the 1990s. What you and I are doing, we're using up an hour of other people's listening time, and it's very clear to them that we don't have any script for this. We don't have any, predetermined structure on how this conversation is going to go. And I can think of lots and lots of recording sessions that I was part of in the 1980s, 1990s, where you went into a big studio and you had technicians and everything else.
Yeah.
And you had to have the script all worked out beforehand, or it would be seen of wasting other people's time. You don't know what you're going to say. And if you have two people, each of them knows what their role is, and both of their roles are structured and scripted. And but just think about the freedom that we have in 2018 compared with and it wasn't just, probably neither of us really would have been capable of this 21 years ago, but we are now because we've done a lot of this. And the freedom just to start talking and just see where the conversation goes, compared with, very, very much more limited technology back then.
Yeah. Do you remember when you recorded How the Best Get Better?
Trying to think of the year because that'll tell me. Probably late 90s.
Well, 20. It had to be. I think it had to be even before that because
you came in on the basis of that. Yeah, so it would have been.
You know what I always wanted to remind Joe?
Probably.
Sorry.
Yeah, it would have been 96 then. I mean, if you came in 97, I would have done it. Yeah.
So I always love to remind Joe Polish that's that I found that, and then that I introduced to Jerry Ballinger and Terry Hunnefeld, and that then got introduced to Joe, and that whole thing was very funny. I always want to remind him of that.
Well, Joe Stump too. Joe Stump came in,
and Joe Stump, yeah.
And Joe, of course, I just saw him about at the end of July. He was in for his workshop after
a couple of days after I was there.
Yeah, and I would go in and I would do it word for word from a written script, and even the book series that I started in at the end of 2014, and we're just getting back book 14 in 15 quarters. But I started off that for the first 3 or 4 books, actually doing word for word from the finished book script. And then I said, well, this is kind of silly. If they want to hear the words, they can read the words. And so what we do now is the same outline that created the transcript for the writer to actually write the book. We use that same outline that Shannon Waller and I for her interview, and we just go back over the interview. But meanwhile, I've got the knowledge that I've acquired from the first interview, and now I take it into other dimensions. And we don't duplicate in our recording of the books what we already established in the text. I said, well, if you want the text version, read the text, and if you want this version, listen to it. It's a different dimension.
I love that. Yeah, it's really that's been the great evolution we see.
Of course, you love it. But I have people who do not have 10 quick starts. They have 7, 8 fact finders, and they said, well, there's a real difference in the way you said that in the audio than the way it is in the book.
Which is
and
it?
Which is it?
Yeah.
I said it's
funny.
both. I said it's both.
Yeah.
And they said, well, I'm seeing kind of contradictions there. And I said, well, that's good for your brain.
That's right. Good for your brain.
I said,
do you
do push-ups?
Right.
I said, do you do push-ups, in the gym? And he said, yeah. And I said, is it sometimes hard? And I said, it is. And I said, and the reason is there's a difference between your muscle and gravity. There's a contradiction. You're
right.
It makes you stronger.
Oh, I love it. That's so funny.
Yeah. So anyway, and then the cartoons are different again. We do the cartoons, and Hamish is very interesting since we've been doing all the cartooning on Zoom together. So we do all the cartoons together, and we have the text, which is easy to read because each of them is just 4 pages. And then we'll say, okay, so what's the real center here? If we're going to have a big visual here, what would be the center? We're not going to follow it sequentially. We're just going to say, okay, well, they've read it. Now, what are we going to give them? And what used to take us 5 days of back and forth emails and drawings, we're now able to establish in about an hour just actually drawing the rough diagrams right on the screen. And there again,
I love
the
it.
technology. And Zoom really, wasn't all that obvious when I started the book process 4 years ago, but now it is, and we're able to do that.
So you're doing screen sharing while he's drawing as you're talking?
Yeah, we screen share. So both of us are on the screen. We can see each other and we can talk back and forth, but he can also just create a white space on the screen and do
something like this.
Do the rough outline of the 2 pages of cartoons, and we just say, okay, well, I think this time, Hamish, the first page is just going to be a single cartoon, and the second page is going to be 3 cartoons. Okay, so the first thing I do is just get the spacing, and I'm aware what the chapter before this looks like, so I try to always make sure that they're not seeing the same shapes or the same outlines from one chapter to the other for variety's sake. First of all, it would bore me, and I don't want to bore anyone else, I'm really good at not boring other people because I usually get bored before they do.
I love it. You got a new job title, conversational cartoonist. Who knew you could create cartoons through conversation? That's really...
Yeah, it is. And we're getting freer and freer. And I'm noticing that Hamish is doing, coming in and saying, hey, I got a really great idea on this. So he's getting freed up too. It's not he's religiously following, the ideas coming from me. He's now seeing possibilities. Yeah. And it's really great. But it's... And it's kind of funny because I'm a trained artist, and I don't do any drawing at all. I have to do it through my thinking and through my words, and it actually makes me a little bit sharper about seeing interesting things and remembering them. I'm noticing since we're doing this process every quarter, that I'm really on the outlook for really, really interesting and unique kind of visual things that maybe we can steal from. Stealing is very important. Yeah, I mean, you know.
Yeah, you know, the whole, I'm starting to see the whole, you're talking about being freed up, and I'm really aware now of the speed of conversation really being the path out. Like I've started adding this to my procrastination check-ins of, you know, okay, procrastinate, what have you got for me? And immediately then, because I had noticed that I would typically go into I need to block the time off for this, and it was going to require me doing something, you know, alone by myself, off by myself, doing it. And that's when I would subconsciously notice a lot of like wiggling going on, you know, that there all these other distractions and things would get in the way. And
yes.
I have really gotten into the habit now, building this habit of, as soon as I say what the procrastinations are, I've chosen my top 3 is to not leave the scene of that without getting into or setting up the conversation that's going to further it, you know?
Yeah.
And I really have it where I've got, I keep asking myself who can I, to really get even deeper into getting everything done with a who, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting because, I've been listening to Joe Polish at his Genius Network over the last 2 or 3 years, especially as he's really zeroed in on genius recovery, giving a new context to the whole issue of addiction, especially addiction among high-performing human beings. Movie stars, creators, artists, and everything else, but especially entrepreneurs. And the one thing that's really left me is I've really studying more and more about dopamine, the desire for dopamine as a tool for actually creating your future, as a strategic tool. And my feeling is that our who, not how, or the line between making it up and making it real, is that you cross that line and there's a tremendous drop in dopamine. If you, in your case, in my case, if we've made up a really great idea, and brainstorming is one way. But brainstorming pumps dopamine, and seeing procrastination as the indicator of what your top 3 priorities are right now actually pumps dopamine. And then you are, if you then go isolated with yourself into the house, the dopamine drops, and therefore you're subject to all sorts of distraction that has more dopamine than the thing you just identified. But actually thinking about the who can do the how actually pumps dopamine. Oh, I'm really excited. I've got a who can do this how. And then to actually give really clear directions, knowing that you're not going to do any of the work, but somebody else is going to do the work, that actually keeps you in a dopamine framework. So, I think the thing is, I'm going to give you an analogy here, is that you have to be a dopamine surfer.
Okay.
You're jumping from wave to wave.
I see a cartoon coming here.
Yeah, but you're jumping from wave to wave. You're not going below the water. If you go below the water, the sharks get you. Like the distraction sharks take a nip out of you. You know, so the whole thing that I'm here is that you're you know, but I had never thought of that, this ability to self-generate your own internal chemicals as a way of designing and constructing your future as a kind of a strategic capability.
You know what's really, that I get that now, that's really resonant with me, because that was along the same line of what led me to the idea of softening the verb that I was saying. Like you're saying, so what, seeing certain verbs either raise my energy or lower my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what you're talking about is completely in that line there, that brainstorm is at the top of that's dialing my quick start to 10. And the, you know, it's, if I look at it as that, and what I would get blocked with is, you know, writing, like write the book is very different than brainstorm the book. And write is, all those things fit into my implementer of one. Of course, anything to do with physically getting my hands on the tools and doing something is going to be, it's not going to be a dopamine, it's going to be a negative, right? It's going to be a drain on that and to be avoided. So getting this up there, having that, the brainstorm there, you know, the way you describe it too, like because I have an infinite capacity for making stuff up. I love to work on things. I love to solve problems. I love to do that. I love to do it. And I look at it's not just like an adjacency to push it over into making it real. It's as if it's like you've got to go through a moat filled with, you know, sharks and alligators or whatever it is to get to the other side, and I can stand on the shore of the make it up, and I can see clearly what it looks like on the other side, but it's like I can't swim, or I don't have a conveyance to get to the other side.
Yes.
You know?
What we're creating is a bridge over troubled waters.
Right. Yes.
You know,
this is really
the thing is about this is that this has been an eternal problem for humans, and it goes back right to the beginning. You know, I mean, you know, we're talking about something that isn't. I mean, we have a different reality to work with in the, you know, our particular time because of technology, and it's you know, thank God. I was going to say thank God I was born now, but you know, when else would I have been born?
Right.
Well, think if you were born in 1600. I said, well, I don't think it would be me. I think there was somebody born in 1600. It just wasn't me. You know, I mean, people often say, well, thank God you were born when you were. And I said, well, when else would I have been born?
Right. Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, people said, just imagine if you were in their shoes. I said, well, if I were in their shoes, it wouldn't be me, would it be them?
Right, exactly.
So, and, you know, so the thing about this is that, you know, I always, you know, I've got that phrase, and it's worth a small book, is play to win with the cards you have. You know, I mean, that's all that anybody has ever had in, you know, in human history, is you've had the possibility of playing the game with the cards you have. And, you know, and one of the blessedness, you know, blessings of living in your own time is that you have no comprehension what's going to be available ahead of you. Let's say 10 years, you know, gee, you know, I wish I had the, you know, what was available 10 years from now. And I said, well, it's meaningless. It's just a thought. Right now, you've got a reality, you've got opportunities, you've got thoughts, you've got aspirations, and you've got cards to play with. Just play the game fully, but there's some rules to the game. You can win if you play the cards this way, and you'll lose if you play the cards that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's never really, I mean, right now we've got access to so many great cards.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about the tools that we have now as the availabilities, I love that our last Game Changer workshop, when we were talking about how many who's away from freedom are you, you know?
Oh, yeah.
That's really what it comes down to, is that it's really a matter of the right who's. Who are the who's that are, the path to freedom for you?
Yeah.
I don't think we had somebody really that put them in a trance. If I remember, and then at the end of the day, they were realizing the big breakthrough for them was realizing they're 4 who's away from freedom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was
the interesting thing, I think that was in March. So we're in August right now. And that was, roughly about 6 months ago. And I saw him. He's a UK client, Carl Castledine. And I saw him in May, so 2 months later. And I had him as a panelist for a presentation I was giving in London. And he had already knocked off 3 of them. As a matter of fact, he had knocked off 3 of them within the first 2 weeks after he was in Chicago. And he was just working on the 4th one. And then he came back in July and he had all 4 of them. And he said, you can't believe what's happening, simply because I had that insight, and I have this measuring stick called a who. And I use impact filters, 4 impact filters, to trigger them. And he said, I can't believe the amount of talent and resource I have available to me going forward that I didn't realize before I had the insight in March. So first of all, it's just the thought that something's possible, and then you don't cut yourself off the knees by trying to self-implement your vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. And I mean, I think that you realize that, it almost feels too, it just seems so, it's so counterintuitive that the less that I actually do, the more I get done,
Yeah. Yeah, I started a thought some minutes ago, but it's in the outline that I'm doing on the Who Not How book. And it's not one of the major headings, it's a subhead. And the subhead is it says test, can you do nothing? Okay, so, but
I like the sound of it already.
Yeah, and what it means is that when you get the vision of a bigger and better result for yourself, test yourself out whether you can get that result by doing nothing,
Well,
and that's just,
yeah.
Test out, and then if said, well, you got to do something. Okay, so what's the least I can do to get the result? And the least I can do in my world is to do an impact filter. That's the least I can do, and then have a conversation about the impact filter. So there's this testing immediately of your goals that I say, test, can you do nothing? And then you say, well, I can get rid of 90% of it pretty quickly,
Right.
And, but if you don't test yourself and actually, apply sort of like a yardstick to it, or some sort of tool to it, you're likely to get tempted into doing this stuff. But if there's a clear-cut recognition with this project, out of the 100% required to achieve this, I can get away with 5%, and the 95% is handled by others. See, and I think that's a very useful upfront measurement. It's a pre-measurement. I mean, you want to measure your results at the end, but there's a pre-measurement, just how much you can restrict your own engagement and involvement in the project and still get the result that you're visualizing.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that in terms of like another level of it. I've almost looked at it as different levels of altitude on it, you know, like thinking about, in a way, how as you go up, it's almost like from entrepreneur, you know, if you think about like the level from an employee to an entrepreneur where you're doing something, all the work yourself, to, you know, somebody who is now focusing on unique teamwork, and then a self-managing company kind of thing, and going all the way up, that there's almost like a mogul level in a way where when you think about, you know, you use the entertainment industry. If you think about like the film industry or movie industry, that, you know, there's the person who's got the idea to, you know, write the movie and then direct the movie and act in the movie and do the editing and do all the doing of the thing. But then, you know, one layer up from that is like a studio, you know, a studio head who's empowering people under him to green light projects. And then there's somebody above that who like owns the studio, that all of these things are happening and they're not doing anything of it.
Yeah. And then our world, you know, again, it's called Landia, is Netflix, because Netflix is the studio of studios. You know, I mean, every studio in the world is trying to get its stuff on you know, on Netflix. I mean, I was looking at some of the salaries, and I mean, Game of Thrones, you know, which is probably an outstanding example. You know, it's, I think the final season is number 8. I think number 8. It might be number 8, but you know, it's roughly you know, 80 movies. You know, basically this one series is like 80 one-hour movies, and they're more, you know, a really great television hour is incredibly better written, incredibly better directed, incredibly better acted than the typical 2-hour movie theater movie. You know, especially when they're part of a series where this is just one chapter. And the reason is they can really dive deep into the dialogue, the character, and everything else, because they've had time to develop this hour, and they've got a lot of hours after this. So they're thing. But those actors, you know, there's about 5 who are sort of constants right from the beginning. They make $1 million an episode. You know, they do 10 episodes a year. They get $10 million, and they're so crucial to the future that they're more or less guaranteed. So let's say the top actor, and then they get royalties too. You know, I mean, besides what they're paid up front. So they're sitting there with $80 million. Let's say, the really key players. They're getting $80 million over an 8-year period. Plus, they're doing other things. You know, that's not the only thing they're doing that year, and they get royalties coming. So,
it's pretty good. And I mean, the guys who create these shows and write the shows and are getting amazing deals right now. I don't know I forget who the guy.
George Martin is the writer. But he's not doing the you know, he's not George Martin is the book writer, but he's not the person doing the script for the you know.
Somebody just signed to a $300 million deal. Bring his work over to Netflix.
And you know, I mean, I think the number that I was talking with Peter Diamandis on a podcast about 2 weeks ago, and he said that this year Netflix will spend I think the number is $6 billion on new original content. $6 billion, that's a very, very significant amount of money.
It really is.
And that's just
amazing. And you think about that though, that global, no matter where the distribution, that it's not. You think about how much actual content is being streamed. It's like our access to things. Even 20 years, the distribution that we had, like the output channels, is if you wanted to watch a show, you had to be in front of the TV on Thursday night at 9:00 when Seinfeld came on, right? And that was that now, and there you'd multiply that by the 3 networks and the prime time hours that are available. There was a very limited output of the things. But I think if you look at how many minutes are being streamed on Netflix now of all of the content, people having access to all of it at any time, it's just the marketplace, our demand and desire for these long form series is, I find it insatiable, that I still, even though of all of the things, you're still waiting for, there's still, I still have appetite for more.
Yeah. It's, and this is endless. I mean, because, the standard here, and it's, basic to anything that gets better and gets bigger, is that it's faster, it's easier, it's cheaper, and you get a bigger result out of it. It's all 4 happening. That's where breakthroughs come from. And, if you go back 20 years ago, there were people who made money, and this is true in the world in general. It's kind of Newton's third law. Newton's third law is for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. Well, in the world, there's great people with great innovations that they can see very clearly. And, they're very excited about, and they're emotionally committed to it, and they get people to invest in this. But there's people whose entire job is for that not to happen. And what I mean is, that people who are already making money out of the way the status quo right now are very resistant to something bypassing the status quo. So I'm sure the Hollywood was resisting this whole Netflix thing. I bet they're using lawyers, they're using everything they possibly can.
Yeah.
But they didn't recognize it earlier. Oftentimes it's a bit, Blockbuster didn't. Blockbuster's the famous roadkill.
Sure.
And they just got wiped out. They got wiped out in about 10 months. And Blockbuster itself was a threat to Hollywood. And it was a distribution system that initially bypassed the movie theaters.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. And you start to see that pattern now. We've seen that happen where, Blockbuster was the VCR. That whole thing really was a disruptor to the movie industry and even to like scheduled television. And you start to see that now everything has landed at Netflix and on-demand stuff. We've seen it in the music industry. That everything, the CD and the MP3 especially, and now Spotify and streaming services are where everything has landed. It's just really great times to see what we've come into digitized wise. Access to everything we want at any time. And speaking of digitized stuff and downloading, I had a really great life lesson that happened just a couple of weeks ago. And I wanted to tell you about it because it fits with what we're talking about with our three things. That I got a new iPhone, and my new iPhone, of course, was then restored from my iCloud backup of the previous iPhone. So you don't have to do anything to start it up. It just sort of draws everything and, okay, we're over on this device now. And in the process of that, all of the apps and all of the things that I had on my phone need to download, or restore. And so you see the placeholder for them, but they're kind of grayed out where they haven't yet downloaded. And I was looking at a whole screen of them where it was all just grayed out placeholders for where the apps are. And if you push on that app, you click on that app, then it will download and you see a circular progress bar, like a pie chart that's getting bigger and bigger as it's getting closer to 100% downloaded. Well, I had a screen of them and I pushed them all. I just went, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I pushed, there's 24 of them on the page here. And what was really interesting to watch was that it didn't download all 24 at the same time. What happened was it progressively it downloaded the first one, and only when it got to about 80% complete on the first one did the second one start to, you could see some movement over there. And then as it finished up, all the energy went to downloading the second app, and then the third, and then the fourth. It wasn't downloading 24 things all at once. And I thought that's a really great metaphor or simile or whatever would be the appropriate thing there for the way that our attention bandwidth is.
Yeah.
That if we think about all the things, the 24 things that we could possibly do, and we've narrowed it down to the 3 for today, and then just go, incrementally through those, there's more evidence that that's the most efficient way or effective way of taking a limited, attention resource.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing that I find about that, and this is the basis for probably a whole podcast, but Kevin Kelly, started Wired magazine. Kevin Kelly's been around for 25 years, and he's been sort of an futurist, but also just about technology, period. It's not just about any particular technology. He's sort of a philosopher of technology. But I came across a fascinating article, and we included this. I have a quarterly book club here in Toronto with about a dozen strategic coach clients, and every quarter we meet, and we're now into our 17th year, so every quarter for 17 years. And what we do is we get a book for the quarter, and then we also submit articles, and I have a team member at Coach who takes the articles from wherever they come. She just gets the links from, and then she creates a 8.5 by 11 format, and we create a spiral bound book, and that book is sent out. So it's about 30 articles, and they're all common formats. So it's actually a fascinating book when you get the article book. It's actually usually more interesting than the single purpose book that somebody else has written. But the article that we did from Kevin Kelly was why artificial intelligence will never surpass human intelligence. And it was the most cogent. He said, and the reason is he said the whole premise of artificial intelligence surpassing human intelligence is that it comes down to a single thing that's either true or not true, and that is that humans have general intelligence. And therefore, if we have general intelligence, then, we had chess intelligence, and artificial intelligence now surpasses us in chess and then Go and Jeopardy and everything else. But his point is, Kevin Kelly says, but there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that there's a thing called general intelligence, because we would share it and nobody shares it. In other words, if you can, we're resonant minded, you and me, Dean, but if you actually went into Dean's universe and followed what he thinks about every day, and then go over to Dan's universe and follow what he thinks about, there would be absolutely no similarity to the thinking that we did that day. We're both narrow thinkers, and we have particular things that we follow, and those things are not predictable really from one to day. We cover old ground every day, but we also explore new ground every day. And he said, well, this is true of all of nature. And he said, the great arrogance here is that somehow we're the top of the thinking chain that's developed from microbes. But he says, actually, there's a circle, and a vastly expanding circle, and human intelligence is just one of the rays coming out of the center of this intelligence. And he says that there's vast amounts of other intelligence in the natural universe. He said, I'll give you an example, squirrels. He said the average squirrel, like the ones we have here in Toronto, can bury 1,000 nuts over a 3-year period and have an exact memory where each one of those nuts is buried. And show me a human who has that type of recall, and you'd be hard pressed. Exactly. So that squirrel, in relationship to that type of thinking, is infinitely superior.
Inevitable, too, which was really great. Mm-hmm. But you're right.
So the whole point is that each of us every day is exploring vastly new territory with our particular version of narrow intelligence. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we're exactly backing up this principle because of the who, not how concept. Why do we not take on the implementation? Because we don't have general intelligence that can do anything. You and I have really, really well-developed intelligence for making stuff up.
Yes.
And chatting. We've developed chatting intelligence. Both of us are well-developed chatters. I remember the first time I met you at the outdoor restaurant up on Avenue Road, and I said, oh, God, this guy can really chat.
That's right. Yeah, that was fun. I remember that night. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that whole, I really, we've always had that ability to have those kind of conversations. And that I think, creates something.
And not everybody does. Not everybody does, So anyway, but I found this enormously refreshing, that the whole universe is there's just a vast, multiplied, vast variety of infinitely differentiated narrow intelligences. And can you use your narrow intelligence to combine, to get involved with a lot of other narrow intelligence? And that's really what we're talking about here.
I love that. Every time we have these conversations, I just get so, I'm in awe at really what the potential is, you've never had more. When you look at it, we see it all the time right now. There's never been a time in history where companies are going from, zero to $1 billion valuation in, less than 3 years. It's really, this is a unique time. And I think it's really because of that, of our ability to that people have created these kind of outlets, conduits for us to tap into the execution collectives in very specialized ways, and it's just putting them together.
Yeah, here's a really interesting measurement about what you just said. That basically the U.S. economy will be really have momentum and have a lot of headway going if in a year 20 companies have become billion-dollar companies that year.
Mm-hmm.
They were smaller at the beginning of the year, but during the year they became billion-dollar companies. If that's true, you had 20 who surfaced. The economy is strong, and if it's less than 20, it's slowing down.
Huh.
So
how many are there normally?
Huh?
I wonder how many there are normally. Like how many go through that, and
how many companies actually?
Yeah.
Well, there's very few. There's very few that get to a billion.
Right.
They get here's not billion in valuation, a billion in actual
sales
results. And actual sales,
right.
That's GDP. It's based on sales. It was a lot of billion-dollar valuations, but a billion-dollar valuation isn't GDP. That's
right.
That's just hope for the future.
But even what's kind of funny is that some of the biggest valued companies, like if you take Facebook and Google, for instance, that nothing they do would show up on the GDP scales, right? They're not producing anything like on the measures of GDP, right? Aren't they talking about a real like goods and exports and that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, it's sales. GDP is based on sales revenue. Did something gets sold? The $1 trillion, Apple is just $1 trillion. Well, that's not revenues.
No, that's valuation. Yeah,
that's just their valuation. In other words, it's a future projection. And Elon Musk is always fooling around with this. Trying to get his his valuation up, but at a certain point, but that's in cloud land. In the real world, you actually got to produce. You actually got to produce and sell something.
A different currency. There's a different currency in Cloudlandia. That's it.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's, you need that. You got to be. You got to be selling hope in order to have investment.
Yes, you're right.
Investment's always, I'm going to invest now for a bigger result later. Well, you got to have that, but he's if he's working 120-hour weeks, there's a growing disparity between the hope and the actuality.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we just blew past it. We blew through.
I love this. Yeah, we had a great.
We just really blew through this. But anyway, this closer you come to the make it up line, but do not cross it, the better off you are.
I think you're right. So I am heading to Australia on Tuesday.
Yes.
I'll be coming back to Toronto. So the next time that I see you will be when we are sitting beside each other live in Toronto doing a great live episode. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, we're very excited. Yep. Four Seasons,
awesome.
Is it?
Oh, no, it's at
the Four Seasons?
No, at the convention center. This is all part of Giovanni's Archangel Academy, and I'm doing a day afterwards just for just for real estate agents. So,
oh, fantastic.
That'd be great.
Yeah. All righty.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks a lot. Have a great trip.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.